I'll never forget that early morning feeling. There was a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen, even though no one really knew what. I was just another face in the crowd, lost in my thoughts, walking along, maybe out of curiosity, maybe desperation. The world outside was harsh. Many like me were searching for meaning, fearful of the future, carrying the weight of their own failures. Suddenly, the crowd fell silent. There he was, Jesus, simple. Yet his gaze pierced right into our deepest secrets, and when he sat down, a sacred hush settled over the mountain. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, something essential is still missing? That's how I felt. It was as if happiness was only for a select few, unreachable by people like me. But at that moment, without raising his voice, Jesus began to teach. The words he spoke challenged everything I thought I knew. He spoke of joy in sadness, strength in gentleness, hope for those who suffer, and a kingdom so near, yet so unlike anything we imagined. Honestly, I wondered if I was brave enough to hear it all, for I realized those words had the power to change everything. Not just the world, but my world. If you've ever sought meaning, justice, or comfort, stay with me, because what I heard on that mountain has the power to transform your life just as it did mine. I'll never forget how that morning began on the mountain. The air was still cool, and I couldn't quite explain why I followed that crowd. Deep inside, I was searching for answers, maybe relief, maybe hope. I, just one face among many, carried the weight of my own pains and doubts. When Jesus sat down, everything went silent. He looked right at us and began to speak. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." It sounded strange to me. I'd always linked happiness with wealth, status, or recognition. But there, for the first time, I realized that true happiness could come from a humble heart, from those who recognize their weaknesses. With every beatitude, I felt he was describing people like me, like my family, my neighbors. Blessed are those who mourn. I remembered my losses, the ache of missing my brother. Suddenly, tears were no longer a shame, but part of the path toward comfort. Blessed are the meek. I thought of how often I believed I had to be strong and tough just to survive. But Jesus spoke of a different kind of strength, the meekness that wins without fighting. With each phrase, more people around me murmured or nodded silently. It was as if he turned the world's values upside down, rejoicing in hunger for justice, feeling blessed even when persecuted. Words that challenged everything I had ever heard. As I listened, I wondered, could true happiness really be about embracing my limitations, seeking justice, showing mercy even when it hurts? For the first time, I saw hope not just for others, but for myself on that mountain. Maybe as you listen to me now, you recognize yourself in these words. Sometimes we feel unworthy of blessing, but what I heard that day changed the way I see God and myself. After that powerful moment when Jesus spoke about the depth of the law, I could feel everything inside me shifting. He then turned to speak about the spiritual practices that had always been part of my routine, giving to the needy, praying, fasting. Yet on that mountain, his words gave these acts a meaning so fresh, it felt as though I was hearing about them for the very first time. For years, I had watched people around me carry out these rituals. Honestly, I often just did what everyone else did. I would see leaders being generous, praying loudly, or fasting for all to see. There was an admiration there, a respect that sometimes felt hollow. But Jesus changed it all when he said, "Be careful not to perform your acts of righteousness before others, to be seen by them. If you do, you have no reward from your Father in heaven." That struck me hard. How many times, without noticing, had I wanted to be noticed, praised for helping, for looking pious? Jesus wasn't looking for applause. He was calling us to a spirituality born in the quiet corners of our hearts. When he spoke about giving, he said not to let the left hand know what the right is doing. Give in secret, without fanfare, so only the Father sees. I began to question my own motives. Was I really generous or just seeking approval? I couldn't help but wonder how craving the eyes of others drained even the most beautiful acts of their value. Looking into the eyes of the crowd, Jesus began to talk about prayer. Don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray standing in the synagogues and on street corners to be seen by others. That pierced me. How many times had my prayers turned into a performance? Yet here he was, teaching that true prayer happens in private. Just me and God, no one else watching or judging. I felt my faith being challenged. Maybe I had prayed more for appearance than for a real connection with the Creator. It was then that he gave us the greatest gift, the Lord's Prayer. Not some mechanical recitation, but a blueprint for honest conversation with God. Every word drew me in. Seeing God as Father, desiring His will above my own, trusting Him for everyday's needs, asking forgiveness and learning to forgive, seeking protection in temptation. That prayer became a mirror. Did I really trust God as a caring Father, or was I desperately trying to control things myself? Next, he spoke of fasting, an act of surrender and devotion. I remembered so many faces showing off their suffering during fasts, making sure everyone noticed their dedication. But Jesus surprised me again. When you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face so that it will not be obvious to others, but only to your Father. It was meant to be an experience for God alone, a time of inward transformation rather than outward show. As Jesus spoke, the message grew clearer. God isn't interested in empty rituals or well-staged acts. He's after authenticity, a relationship where what's unseen matters more than public performance, where both humble smiles and genuine tears count more than a long list of achievements. I couldn't help but let it sink into my everyday life. How often do we trade the authentic for the impressive? How many gestures are just for show, draining us instead of drawing us closer to what truly matters? I realized God was calling me to be real, to expose my doubts, my weaknesses, and trust that with Him, I have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. All those teachings transformed my journey with God. I found that sincere spiritual practices, rooted in an undivided heart, don't imprison but liberate. They turn moments of silence into communion, daily habits into sacred encounters, and simple acts into the foundation for a life with meaning. After everything I heard that day, I left the mountain determined. My walk with God would no longer be for show, but for truth. That's the challenge I still carry with me, a challenge to live real faith from the inside out. After exploring the depth of true spiritual life, Jesus moved on to something that had always been a struggle for me: where I put my treasure and how much anxiety I carried with me each day. Ever since I was young, I worried. Would I have enough for tomorrow? Could I provide for my family, keep us safe, find security in an unstable world? It wasn't just ordinary concern, it was the kind of fear that gnaws at your heart and steals your peace. Then Jesus said something that sounded almost impossible. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Those words swept through every certainty I'd ever built my life upon. I'd always thought the way to peace was by holding tightly to what I could gather, by saving enough to harden myself against bad times. But here was Jesus inviting me to set my heart in a place that couldn't be broken or lost, a place beyond what I could see. He explained that where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. It was as if he was shining a light on my greatest struggle. What really runs my life? What am I truly chasing? Then he spoke about worry, a topic that hit painfully close to home. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more than food and the body more than clothes? I thought back to all the times I'd lost sleep over what might go wrong. The price of grain, the threat of drought, a neighbor in trouble. My mind was constantly cycling through every possible disaster. And now Jesus told me to look at the birds of the sky, the lilies in the fields. None of them struggled, yet God cared for their needs. That image was both challenging and comforting. Was I really less valuable than a sparrow? Why was it so hard to let go of anxiety when my Father saw and cared about every detail? Jesus was calling me to a new kind of faith, a faith that didn't rely on control, but on surrender. He summed it up with a clear direction. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. I'd never heard a promise so bold. Put the kingdom first, live for what is eternal, and God will take care of the rest. Suddenly, the mountain seemed less intimidating, the crowds around me less frightening. A fresh peace settled over my shoulders. The worries that had haunted me began to evaporate, bit by bit. Each time I trusted this strange, upside-down way Jesus was teaching. It wasn't easy to change. Some days my mind slips right back into old patterns. But every time I remember that hillside and those words, I'm reminded, trusting God, letting go of control, and prioritizing what truly matters isn't weakness. It's the deepest wisdom of all. Now, whenever anxiety tries to creep back in, I think about that moment. The call to fix my heart where nothing can be stolen or lost. The gentle reassurance that I'm seen, valued, and cared for, no matter what tomorrow may hold.
Just when I thought I had been challenged enough, Jesus began to speak about how we treat one another. He was very clear, do not judge or you too will be judged. At that moment, I felt as if he was looking right into me, seeing every time I'd condemned someone with just a glance or a thought. I realized how often judging others was almost automatic for me. A careless word, a quick criticism, a sideways glance. But Jesus exposed the absurdity of all this with a simple example. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? I was embarrassed. How many times had I tried to correct others' faults while ignoring my own? That statement disarmed me, inviting me to humility and self-reflection. Then, he talked about prayer, telling us we could ask, seek, and knock, and God would respond. I saw there not only encouragement to pray, but a reminder that the Father wants closeness, that He cares deeply about every need of our soul. I felt hope, as if the gates of heaven had opened just for me. But what struck me most was when Jesus summed everything up in a powerful phrase, the so-called golden rule. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. So simple, yet so demanding. I understood that the kingdom isn't built on words alone, but on actions. And that if I want respect, understanding, and kindness, I must first offer them. Thinking about every person I had clashed with, every injustice I'd committed without real intention, I felt a weight, and at the same time a lightness. The responsibility to change my behavior was mine. I saw it would be difficult, maybe impossible on my own, but that teaching called me to grow, to be merciful, patient, and to transform the way I relate to everyone around me. On that mountain, I realized that following Jesus isn't just about inner faith, but about living with empathy, serving, forgiving, and being a bridge, not a wall. The kingdom of God begins when I recognize the other person as someone just as in need of grace as I am. Since that day, I have been trying, step by step, to build more just and humane relationships, trusting that every small act of kindness brings heaven closer to earth.
After hearing all that, Jesus closed his teaching with a powerful image that stayed deeply engraved in my heart. Anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. In that moment, I could clearly picture the difference between someone who only listens, maybe even feels moved, but doesn't truly change, and the one who actually applies these teachings. A house built on rock is strong and steady, able to stand firm through storms, a metaphor for a life grounded in the values of God's kingdom. Jesus warned that those who hear and don't act are like someone building their house on sand. When the storm comes, everything collapses. We all know how life can be full of storms, hardships, losses, doubts, conflicts. I thought about myself. How many times have I heard deep words but kept things the same? How often have I avoided change out of fear or comfort? But the invitation was to do more than listen. It was to act, to let Jesus' teachings become the solid foundation of my life, the base that holds me steady when everything around me seems to fall apart. As he spoke, I felt the weight of that responsibility and also the hope. Choosing to build on the rock doesn't mean no troubles will come, but it means I can withstand them, rise again, and keep going. Jesus also showed his authority and power, which gave me confidence that the way he proposed wasn't just theory or philosophy, but a real truth. Since that day, I've been trying to live by that conviction. Not just a hearer, but a builder. Someone whose life is firmly established on faith, practice, and love. And you, what kind of house are you building in your life? Are you ready to build on the rock that never fails?
I have never been the same since that day on the mountain. It was not just a beautiful speech, but a call to transformation, a real chance to rebuild my life on foundations no one can take away. I discovered that true security is not found in circumstances, but in the daily choice to live out everything I heard from Jesus. Humility, mercy, faith without masks, trust even in hard days, love even for those I once thought didn't deserve it. Looking back, I see that I only found meaning and strength when I decided to put his teachings into practice. The storms came, as they always do, but my house stood firm, not because I was better than others, but because I trusted the true rock. And today, looking into your eyes, I ask, what kind of house are you building? Are you willing to challenge everything, even yourself, to live this kingdom here and now? Maybe you, like me, fear making mistakes or starting over, but believe me, what I heard on that mountain changed my story. And it can change yours too. If something touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share in the comments, which of Jesus' words impacted you most today? And remember, there's still time to change, to live out the greatest call of all time. Stay with me on this journey. The Sermon on the Mount is not an end, it's a beginning. Together, in the simplicity of everyday life, let's choose to build each day upon the rock that never fails. Until next time.